our brother Virgilio Osario, I'll call our Sister Linda Uguena, and last but not the least, our Sister Ruth Richards. We thank you guys very much for accepting to share your testimonies, and I pray that all of us will be blessed as we listen to them. Thanks. I will now hand over to our Sister BJ. She's going to be the interviewer. She'll be asking them some questions, and from there we'll take off.
So welcome, everyone. I'm so glad that you agreed to join in with our panel discussion this afternoon. And so as we get started, the first thing I'd like for you to do is, and you can, I'm going to ask the question, and when I ask the question, each person will answer the question before we move on to the next question. Okay? All righty. So, the first question that I'm going to ask is, what was it that made you realize that something was wrong or something was going on that was different? Rick, would you like to start?
Different in a good way or the bad way?
Well, just well, for you, as we know, why don't you tell the audience who you're going to be talking about so that you can set the tone for your particular testimony.
My father died about 3.5 years ago, and when he died, my mother came to move in with me. Their lifestyle had led them to where most of the last several years of their lives, they would sit on the porch and kind of watch the world go by. And because they were on a fixed budget, they basically ate very inexpensive, not very nutritious food. So when I had my mom come up, they told me that she was in severe congestive heart failure. She was at my house not even 3 weeks before she broke 4 vertebrae in her back just getting out of bed because she had such severe osteoporosis. And I decided that the health things they were doing were not helping, and so through the experience I have working with my brother and through, Spirit of Prophecy, I put her on an exercise regime and a change in diet, and they removed all those diagnoses.
Okay, thank you, Rick. And we're going to go with Virgilio, and you can tell us also about what your attitude was in relationship to health.
I think I always had a healthy understanding of the relationship between how we eat and how we feel. I think, like all of us, we know something is bad, but we still eat it. What triggers some of the things for me is that I have a propensity for gut. So even before I started any diet, I already was taking care of myself. So I don't eat red meat, I don't eat a lot of things, I don't eat any lobster, anything that would cause it even before I became a Seventh-day Adventist. So the relationship with food and myself was always there, but I think at some point when I started gaining more weight, and obviously as you gain more weight, the propensity for getting gout is extremely easier. And so when I started getting more and more slight attacks, and it for those who don't have gout, is essentially metabolic diseases where your joints have crystallized, and so it's extremely painful. So at that point, I think going on and on, I figured there's got to be a change that I have to make.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll go to Linda. And before Linda starts, I just want to say to the audience that If you have any questions that you want to ask of the panelists, please write them down during our discussion so that when we come to the Q&A, you'll be able to ask your questions. We do have index cards and pens for anyone that might need an index card or a pen to write your question on. I know you can write it on the back of the program or the insert, but if you want an index card or if you need a pen, we're ready to serve you with that. Okay? So keep that in mind. Okay, Linda, please.
Pretty much like Virgilio, I'd have to agree that for the most part, you do know
Then
what you're
put
supposed
the-
to. Well, you do know what you're supposed to do in terms of health and exercise, but and there's so many different methods that you could do. Sometimes it's overwhelming trying to figure out what method is going to work best for you. So I think for me, it was just making a connection with something that would work that I could stick to for the long term, and then once I did find that, it was easy to continue on the journey.
Okay. Did everybody hear Linda? So Linda, when you talk, make sure you put the mic close to you, okay? All righty. Go ahead, Sister Ruth.
Well, for those of you who don't know much about me, my career has been in the healthcare profession. I'm a retired registered nurse. And I had a little insight into my health because I know the history of my family. We have a strong history of hypertension and diabetes. That's genetic, and that's one of the causes. Many people get high blood pressure or diabetes. It's very often genetic. So I kept a close eye on my blood pressure and my blood sugar, and I've had, for over the years, been monitored by my physician. As the years went by, I began to see my blood pressure going up despite what I did to keep it down. It was not working. The doctors would prescribe various medications and they did not work. Some, I would react to some of them, some would just have no effect on me. And as the time went by, I went into a hypertensive crisis. Many people didn't know this, but I ended up in the emergency room with blood pressure, with the top systolic, for those who understand. The top reading was over 200, and the bottom was much lower. And I glanced at the machine, and I saw 222 over 190. I said to the nurse, is this machine working? She said, oh, yes, it is. I don't think she expected me to look at it. And so, of course, they gave me medication and they stabilized me and sent me home. But it was a problem with the physician to know what to do with me, what medication to. It was a real challenge. And then I realized it was a friend that I knew, and sister I knew from Florida. And I was talking to her, and she said, Ruth, why don't you try natural cures? And not that I didn't know of natural cures, but it didn't dawn on me. And she recommended somebody to me.
Okay.
And the young lady came from Tennessee. And as I go on, I can tell you what my experience was with her coming to help me with that blood pressure.
Thank you so much. In fact, as we go on, you're going to be able to go and to hear how they took certain steps in terms of their health challenges. So for our next question, I want you to explain to the audience, even though you knew, a lot of you said that you knew the right thing to do, what was that defining moment? What really caused you to say, you know what, I've got to do something, I've got to make a change? And so, Rick?
My mother moved in with me. I knew what to do beforehand. They wouldn't listen to me when they were thousands of miles away. But when she moved in, she didn't have a choice. I didn't feed her things that were unhealthy. And we started a program of walking to get her heart condition gone. We started just doing 10 laps up and down the hall. And then eventually we'd go out and do 10 laps up and down the driveway. And eventually we got to go up one one house up and then 2 houses. And now we're up to half mile a day. And a year ago, November, they removed the diagnosis of congestive heart failure, which they said she would die in 1 year of. So that was one. Then when she broke her bones, within the first 3 weeks of coming to my house, she broke 4 vertebrae. And that was pretty traumatic for her. She was giving up on life. And we changed her diet. And the last bone scan, which was a year and a half ago, she had a 25% increase in bone mass. And they just couldn't understand how that happened at her age. She's 94.
Thanks, Rick. To God be the glory.
I think mine wasn't as extreme as Rick's, but mine was quite coincidental. I was watching Netflix. I saw this particular show called, it's actually a movie that Joe Cross did, Sick, Fat, and Almost Dead. And so I watched that maybe 2-3 times, and I realized, hey, maybe this can work for me. And essentially, if you haven't seen the movie, it's essentially you go on a juicing diet, and it's all fruits and vegetables, nothing else. And so the next day, it just happened to be coincidental. I told Arlene, let's start this. Let's do this. And we started, and I went a little farther. She didn't go as far. And so ever since then, it's just juicing and vegetables. That's the majority of the diet.
Great. Linda?
I won't say that there was a specific moment. I think it was a series of little things that made the click work for me. Losing my father to congestive heart failure was one of the things that made me realize just how short life is. Watching him go through Alzheimer's, that was also another indication that you can't wait for tomorrow for something because you never know how long you have. And then also just getting tired of feeling tired and not liking what I saw when I looked in the mirror, just how I felt. And also that every time I went to the doctor, that pre-diabetic diagnosis was looming and that eventually it would progress to full-blown diabetes. So for me, it was just a series of little things coming together and then just saying enough is enough.
Sister Ruth?
Well, I was compelled to make changes because I knew the history of my family with so many people who've had strokes and so many people who have had fully blown diabetes. So I knew what I had to do. I didn't have the willpower, the discipline to do it until I began to see those diseases staring me in the face, knowing exactly what the outcome could be. And they say when you know better, you do better. So that was my situation.
Now, we definitely have heard you talk about the things that brought your attention to your health. And we see you here today and you're looking really vibrant, but I know that you must have had some challenges. So let's talk about that. What type of challenges did you face during your journey? And maybe you can give us some of your solutions for resolving them.
Well, for me, I think it started before my mother got there. I raised Adventist, vegetarian most of my life, doing supposedly all the right things according to its vegetables. Just didn't happen to be good vegetables. And a lot of pasta and a lot of things that were not meat were terrible. And I ended up developing arthritis, and I couldn't even close my hands. And due to the fact that I work with my brother in the medical practice, we know that inflammation causes that, so I ran a food allergy panel, found out I was allergic to 19 things, cut them out, and my hands started working. So when Mom came, basically I knew she needed the exercise for her heart, but her bones, you need to go and take and get rid of the acidic diet. The American diet is very acidic. which leaches calcium right out of the bones. So by going to a vegetable plant-based diet, especially more towards the green ends and cutting out all the meats and the dairy. Dairy is one of the biggest things over the age of 35 for women to rob your bones of calcium. So we changed all of that, and within a year, she already had 25% bone growth.
Amen to that.
I think mines are more how to get in the diet routine. I have 2 teenagers. We are kind of busy, and usually what happens is that as we go along, we find kind of fast food on occasion. And so that kind of propensulates the eating piece, and so it's easy to grab something. You'll probably note there is no fruit juice place in every block. It's usually a Wendy's, Burger King, or McDonald's. And so that was a part of the challenge. The other challenges after I started was that you have to be dedicated and make sure you do the preparatory work. Because if you don't do that, the next day will come and you'll be in a rush to get out and you will not do it, and it's not consistent. So for me, it was preparation and staying to the course because it's too easy. And the biggest challenge is that when you do a juice diet, just purely juice, the first, second, and third days, you're detoxing. And so you feel lightheaded, it just doesn't feel good. And so that was probably the biggest challenges for me.
One of my biggest challenges was learning how to say no. I like to please people for the most part. I try to be accommodating, but I had to learn that in order for this to work, I had to put myself first. So I had to learn how to say no, and part of that was also learning to be prepared all the time. I have kids who have allergies. I'm always prepared for them. I always pack their food, but I had never really done that for myself. So now it was time for me to learn that in order for this to work, I had to always be prepared. I had to take the time out to do that. And once I got that under control, it was easy.
Now, Sister Ruth, I know before you talked about that someone came all the way from Tennessee, and so you can talk about that and also your challenges in your sharing at this time.
Well, one of my challenges was just lack of willpower. I wasn't willing to make the change as readily as I should have. So I had to pray about it because I'm not a creature of habit. And some of the things that I had to do, like one of the things she had me do is getting up at 5:30 in the morning. And I'm retired. Talk about a challenge. Anyway, while she was around, I was very compliant, and for a while after she left, I was compliant, but then I lapsed, and I have to admit. But these are the things that we have to, once we start, we cannot give up, because I find that when I fall off the wagon, so to speak, then things begin to happen, go in the wrong direction. So that's one of my biggest challenges. And the diet, sometimes I just do not have the energy to do the juicing and to do the things that I ought to do. But then prayer changes things, and I pray about it, and the Lord just gives me the impetus to do what I have to do.
Yeah, we thank you for actually sharing with us the fact that not only that you had to pray about it, but that you want things to go the way that you know they're supposed to go. But it helps us to realize that we're all human. And in our humanness, we have a tendency to be creatures of habit. And so once our eyes are taken off that goal, we have a tendency to slip back into those old habits. So as we're continuing with this, I want all of us to just be encouraged to know that if there are challenges that you might be facing, that even though you may slip back, that just bring yourself to the point where you say, okay, I'm going to stay on point, because we all fall short. And so knowing that, it doesn't mean that we can't overcome whatever challenges we may face. So going to the next question. Just a minute. My phone. I should have printed this out. Okay. So how long did it take for you to begin to see results?
Well, for my arthritis, because I caught it early, it was 2 weeks, I had reversed it. For my mother, basically, it took her to where she was, when people here remember, she came by wheelchair. She could not walk down this, into the church to anything. She went wheelchair everywhere. And I got her out of the wheelchair in about a year, maybe a year and a quarter, and she started walking, and being able to do that. We're up to a half mile a day. So she got last summer to finally the half mile, about probably halfway through last summer before she was walking a half mile a day. So, it's slow because her heart was really, really weak. And even going over Christmas, where she doesn't go out of the house in the winter, it's cold. And she hates cold. She wears a jacket even when it's not cold, but she thinks it's cold. So even in the winter, she doesn't exercise as much, because the only thing we do is when we go to the store. She doesn't get that half mile in. So by the end of the winter, her ankles were swelling up again and showing that the heart failure was coming back. And only in the last 2 weeks or so, since the weather's got warmer, has her feet gone back to a normal size again.
For me, I think it was almost immediate. Like I said, it's extreme because you are not eating anymore, you're just juicing. So juice is something that impacts you right away. And so the next day, you feel already the fogginess because you're detoxing and you're removing all those toxins from your body. And as you go along, for me at least, it's been after the 3rd, 4 days, detox goes into like a normal mode. And now the propensity for you to want the juice is more than what you want your regular food. So for me, it was relatively instantaneous.
For the program I was on, it basically starts out as a 10-week program where you go through different nutritional stages. So I would say within the first 3 weeks or so, you start to notice differences in how you feel physically. But in terms of people noticing anything, it probably wasn't until about maybe week 7 or week 8. And it was very discouraging along because I was like, this is not working. I remember my mother saying, just keep going. And I was like, I'm waking up at 4 o'clock every morning to go to the gym. I'm eating right. Nothing is it's not working. And I was like, okay, I'll give it the 10 weeks and see how it works. And eventually, like I said, week 7, 8, I noticed the difference and I just kept on going.
So Linda, before we go to Sister Ruth, can you just explain to the audience a little bit about this 9-week program and what it entailed?
It's a program where basically you start with 3 weeks of detoxing from processed. Basically, it encourages you not to do any processed food. Everything is whole foods, no dairy, no gluten, and you have to commit to working out 5 days a week. It's pretty challenging initially, but there's a sense of community because you go with the same people every day. They encourage you. We have a Facebook page so that people can, talk about whatever challenges they're having. And so that helps a lot, definitely having a sense of community when you're doing something like this, because it's nice to know there are other people going through the same obstacles as you are, and it gives you the strength when you're around other people who are not doing it to keep going, because sometimes even coming to church was actually a challenge initially because I can't eat what everybody's eating in potluck. So the first few weeks I was actually eating in my car because I didn't want to explain what I was doing or like have people say, oh, just a little bit's not going to hurt. So for about 2-3 weeks I was eating in the car. Eventually I started bringing my food in and I would be willing to explain what I was doing.
Go ahead, Sister Ruth.
The impact for me was in a matter of few days, because for the first, mine was a 10-day program. She came to my home. And for the first 6 days, I had no solid food. It was just juicing. And I had juices every 2 hours during the day. And the strange thing about it, I wasn't tempted to go to the fridge and snack. I felt full with just the juicing. And it was all green juices. It was not a combination of carrots or fruit. It was just green juices, the green vegetables. And also, she reversed the way we eat. She made, after the days of juicing, the largest meal was in the morning. So we had dinner in the morning. If anybody can identify with that. That large meal in the morning, a light lunch, and nothing else for the rest of the day except water. And water, we cannot emphasize too much, the water intake. We have to go into that a little bit more because not everybody can drink that amount of water. It depends on your physical, you have to consult your physician with that. But it is recommended that you drink at least 8 to 10 8-ounce glasses of water each day. And sometimes when we feel hungry, we're not really hungry, we're just thirsty and we don't realize it. So sometimes we substitute food for water and it's filling. And there was also cleansing involved. There was days of cleansing as well as the days of juicing. And so it was within a matter of 4 or 5 days I felt the difference and my pressure began to normalize. So it's worth the effort.
Thank you for sharing that. And so, again, when we listen to the different comments that were made, we hear that these simple changes that are made in our life over a short period of time, and sometimes in the case of Rick's mom, it took a longer time, but patience, I think, is the principle that is definitely operative here now, is that we have to be able to be patient with whatever challenge that we have, and also when we decide to make a change, that it may not be overnight. In Virgilio's case, it was. However, if you are consistent, because I heard that come out a lot, if you're consistent and stay with it, then you will begin to see results. So we thank you for sharing that. Moving on to our next question, and I know that many of you have testimonies to share with this, so you may do so at this time. Is there a spiritual text that has encouraged you on your journey? So, Virgilio, maybe we can start with you this time.
Sure. For me, I don't think there was one specific one. I think in general, and this is personally, I knew the things that we should and we shouldn't eat, and so at work, when I saw my colleagues, and I have a lot of Spanish friends at work, I would say, hey, that's not a pecking bird, you shouldn't eat that, and stuff like that. So I always knew in my mind that I knew what I was supposed to eat, but to specify to a particular verse or anything, I don't think that I had that in general. But as a whole, I knew that obviously I had to start eating better if I wanted to feel better.
Okay. Linda?
Initially, I didn't really have a particular verse. I just knew that I had to keep going, and I knew that I could figure it out. But then eventually I came across this verse. It's 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. And it is true, because the temptations will always be there no matter what, but you do have the strength to overcome them. So, and perseverance.
Thank you.
Yeah, my text is 3 John 3, verse 2. Beloved, above all things, I wish you to prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. The Lord did not intend for us to be sick. That's why He gave us that perfect diet in the Garden of Eden. And we know that if we stick with that, I'm not advocating vegetarianism because I am not a full vegetarian, but I am convinced that the Lord wants us to get back to that basic plant-based diet. And if we do, we'll be better off for it.
Rick?
Well, I think for me, what happened with Daniel and, when they went to Babylon and they decided not to eat the common food and it was simple food, that is the verse that stuck out. But although the verse wasn't as much the prayer, that was my bigger thing. The praying made more of it to where I'm aware of it and that I'm counting on God to help me get through it. And it feels like somebody's in your corner. So the Bible text, I don't have a real favorite. That's what comes to mind. But the praying was more for me.
Okay, and so certainly all of the scriptures that have been mentioned are certainly empowering, and I know that we can find comfort in them. And so, Linda, I'm going to ask you to kind of start with our final question before the audience bombards you with their questions. And this one, what advice or encouragement would you give to anyone who may face health challenges or want to make simple changes towards living a healthier life?
You just have to find a plan that works for you. Like, just from talking to us, you'll see that we all did it in a different method. There's no one method that is right, whether, some people say they swear by veganism or vegetarianism or, the juicing, but you just have to find something that you can connect to, that you can commit to living the rest of your life that way, because it is not a sprint, it is a marathon, so you do just have to make that connection with something that works for you.
Excellent. Sister Ruth?
Yeah, well, I would encourage anyone who needs advice to go to somebody who knows what they're talking about, because there's so many people out there who are throwing out things right, left, and center, and they really do not know exactly what is right. There's no one size fits all. So I would advise that we get a Christian counselor who understands the health message and get some advice from there. Because if we do it God's way, that's the best way. And we pray about our situation. Sometimes it does not have to be paying all this money to go to doctors. If we would just stick with a simple diet, if we know what we are supposed to do. And again, I cannot stress too much the importance of water. We need to drink more water. Too many of us are drinking sodas. That's though we know better and we know what the sodas contain. Now I'm hearing that the high fructose, that's the sweetener that is in just the average drink, how dangerous that is. And one would not even think that that was bad for us. So what we need to do is get counsel from people who know what they're talking about and take those counsel and advice seriously.
Okay. Next.
I think there's a couple things that come to mind. I think clarity of mind and always having the hope that the Holy Spirit guides you through. I mean, I think part of that is something that when you wake up, you have to make sure that there's clarity there. And I think when I went through it with just the juicing piece, it gives you clarity of mind. And that may be just for vegetables and just, plant food diets. Other things I would say is, educate yourself. I've seen a lot of information, and going through the different resources, I found different movies that kind of show some of the things. And it's about not only being reactive to your diet, you have to be proactive, because you don't want to get to the point where you're sick and then start dieting. So a couple of recommendations that I have is go out and see Fork and Spoon, a great documentary. Yeah. And then there's Food Matters. So Food Matters is another one that if you look at it, you'll be amazed. And lastly, don't give up. Don't give up the fight. Always fight to diet, to do the thing that you're supposed to. We're human. We will fail. Every day something will happen. But you know what? The next day you can always start again.
That's right. Excellent. Thank you, Rick.
Well, I come from a medical background. My brother's in it, and a lot of our family is doctors or dentists or something like that. So I usually, when people ask me, I ask them, do you want to be on drugs the rest of your life, or do you want to live your life? And then I said, I usually challenge them to try. Basically, in the movies, he said, forks over knives. I got them, and I make DVDs. I know you're not supposed to, but I do it anyway. Because I think, people need to see what you can do with your health. In Forks Over Knives, they studied, China. Over 800 million people. They studied their diets and the disease associated with the diets. And it could show that the best diets are the ones with the most plants and the most alkaline-based diet. Then, the exercise part, as another one. So if you want to stay out of the hospital and lead a productive life, yes, you have to set aside your vices, the ice creams, the cakes, the things that are vices. And it's really hard at potluck because we have so much stuff at potluck that is not good for anybody, but it's filling. And it's just hard at potluck to go and find out stuff to keep you from doing stuff that's not good for your body. And that's where I have my hardest time, is at potluck. The rest of the week is pretty simple.
Wow. Sister Ruth?
Yeah, something that is very important that I think we've all forgotten, and that is exercise. All the diet in the world will not help if we don't move. Those of us who can't run can walk. Go up a set of stairs. If it's winter time, that's what I do in my building when it's winter time and I cannot go to walk. I climb a couple flight of stairs. And it's most important. Recently we've been told that sitting down, especially if you're a secretary, if you're retired, if you're not moving, it's as bad as smoking.
Mm-hmm.
And when I heard that, it really blew me away. But it is true, we have to move.
Exactly. Wow, I think we have gotten a lot of encouragement and also a lot of advice from our four. This is just 4 people in our congregation. You know how many stories we have like this in our congregation of different ones that have gone through? Everybody has a story. And so 2 things from this before we get to your questions. I just want to encourage everyone to share your experiences with each other. Let's do that more, because I know in the sharing, not only do we learn more about the individual, but we learn things that can even support us. And, sometimes there are very hard conversations to have, maybe in your life, in your family, but I know for our church, potluck is a hard conversation to have, because there are a lot of things that we have at potluck that just are not good for us. And so we have to begin to talk about it and begin to make slow changes, simple changes, because as you see, it doesn't happen overnight. And we've been eating this way for a long time. And so if we make those simple changes slowly, then that will make a difference in our overall health. And then we won't hear about so many getting sick as often. And so at this time, I certainly want to thank the panelists for being so transparent and being able to share your stories. And we're not quite done yet, because at this time, we're going to turn it over to you, but our Tom is going to facilitate the Q&A section at this time. So Tom?
Good afternoon. Okay. I just wanted to say that all these testimonies are amazing. And I know every one of us, like Sister BJ was saying, that we all have our testimonies to share. And it helps encourage us, it helps strengthen our faith towards one another. Especially when you know that that food is so personal. Food is a very personal choice to each and every one of us. We all feel a certain way about how we eat certain things, whether it be traditional, whether it be cultural, whether it be just because I want to, or just because it's there, or, you know, it can be a very personal thing. And because of this, 80% of the people that are in the hospital or in the emergency room could have been prevented just with diet alone. So you think of how many people are in the hospital, 80%. So any questions in regards to the panelists that you have been?
Thank you. Actually, mine is more of a comment and a question. And we've talked a lot about potluck. And I know for sure that the potluck meal for a lot of people is their healthiest meal of the week. And for many people, it's their least healthy meal of the week. I've had people that I've invited that are not church members, and they're like, wow, you guys eat so healthy here. Every time I come here, I get a healthy meal. And I was like, okay, we'll take it. So, Tom, being in your profession, what guidelines do you feel like giving the church, and maybe the different teams, or how do you think we can do it in such a way that it's healthier, and you still can't really stop people from bringing their birthday cakes, but as a whole, to make it healthier?
Okay, you asked, so I'll. That's a very loaded question, but I'm not going to complicate, with an answer. But one thing is, like Sister BJ was saying, is we need to make a step-by-step change. One of the things that I have noticed is that there's actually brown rice at potluck. I've been noticing. One of the biggest things is the rice. Is the white rice, whether it's the yellow rice or, arroz con hondules or, whatever, however you want to. There's so many different types of rice, but it's still white rice. So white rice tastes great, especially when you mix it in, but if you really think about it, all it is a spoonful of sugar when it gets metabolized in your stomach. So that's really, and there's no fiber in it. So the best thing, or one of the best things we could do from that perspective, is to move the white to the brown. And people often say, oh, well, you know what, brown doesn't taste that good, or the texture is not that great. So I want something that tastes good. So one thing you can do with the brown rice is that you soak the rice overnight, and then you cook it the next day, and it has the same texture as white rice. So you won't miss that feeling. Because normally when you try to cook brown rice, it kind of is a little tough, and a lot of people don't like that. That's one thing that we could do, especially pastas. Anything that is not white. Anything that is not white pasta. That's one thing, because it's all the white pasta, the white rice, it gets metabolized the same way as in sugar. So we move away from that. We get to, we can talk about different types of pasta. I mean, that's another one thing we could talk about.
So, Lucia, I don't know if you're going to are you going to talk about the brown rice, Lucia? Okay, so before we go off the brown rice, and then we'll give the... Okay, all righty. Okay, so before you do that, just to stick with the brown rice one, I just want to comment that, is Jackie here? So Jackie does this phenomenal brown rice. And Jackie, if you can share with the audience what you do with this brown rice. I mean, it's the best brown rice that I've ever tasted. So she can share that, and then that might help us to make that simple change.
I use brown jasmine rice, and I cook it on stovetop, and I figured out if I do 3 cups, it's 4.5 cups of boiling water. And I saute a little bit of garlic and onion, and they just have to, I eyeball it, I don't really time it, you know, but I know when it's starting to dry out, I lower the heat, and it dries it out, and that makes it smooth, because I don't like sticky rice, so that makes it loose. That's no other trick, but that seems to be the one that doesn't stick. No. It's jasmine brown rice. I bought it in Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's.
Thank you. Lucia.
My comment, it's a comment, because I like to educate and not condemn the members of the church, because it is potluck. So it's mostly it's the women that are coming from 5 days working, and then Friday you're deciding, oh, it's potluck tomorrow, what am I gonna make, what am I gonna do? So let's try not to condemn the women, let's try to educate them because it's potluck, everybody brings what they want to bring. It's not that the church is telling them what to bring, and I think that's the difference. So, like Jide was saying, instead of everyone bringing, maybe the groups, we all get 4 dishes each, 1 good salad, because there are people here that are gluten-free. There are people here that are, you can't eat nuts. But we don't know that. We know some, but we don't know all of them. So here we are, the serving people, but yet we don't know what they're allergic to or what they can't have. So maybe we need to regroup as the G-Day with all our groups, and instead of the church cooking, maybe 4 main dishes. A brown rice, a brown rice, a good salad, beans or legumes. But now it's summertime is coming. So should we be in the kitchen? Should we take a break from this potluck and everyone you bring your own? I don't know, I'm just saying. But also, after we eat, why don't you, BJ, as the leader of the health ministry, when I go to camp meetings, what the people do is they only eat twice, like somebody was saying up in the front, Sister Ruth. But after you eat, you walk. So get a leader, get a young person, get a young man, maybe Shannon, can lead out in the walking of, you know, the group, go to a park. You know, I'm just saying, or just a walk. So, okay, that's enough for me.
Yes, I just want to find out after you soak the rice, if you use that same water to boil it, or you throw it out. So you don't wash it and then soak it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry. Did everybody hear that? Just wash the rice, I guess? Oh.
Just a quick comment on that. I know that from where I come from, the rice is not that clean, so we wash it. But the white rice here has nutrients actually sprayed on it, so it's not a good idea to wash it. But brown rice doesn't have any nutrients sprayed on it, so you need to wash that one. from China and from different places.
I just have a comment too, and that is, Rick said it, especially because he's helping his mom. And Sister Ruth talked about how she had somebody come in. And as somebody who's struggled with different health issues my whole life, I know that, and you alluded to it too, about not condemning, but trying to figure out ways to help. And I know personally that I want to applaud you, Rick. You know, it's just amazing what you do for your mom. And it's like, some of us need help. And it's, I know I should be juicing. Known it my whole life. My mother used to juice. But guess when I get juice? My husband juices for me. You know, and it's humbling, and, you know, but try and often think, if you have a child or a spouse or somebody you know that's struggling with health, you can educate, but actually helping them, doing something for them to help them with their health is huge.
I have one quick question for Linda. What's the name of the program that you went on?
The Max Challenge.
Max?
Challenge.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions or oh, who? Oh, you got a mic.
My suggestion is, and I've been involved in churches that are very gung-ho on this, what about us arranging some cooking classes so people will get ideas of what healthy dishes are and how to make them? I've been learning to make my meals from scratch, vegetarian meals, and it's fun, but it's no fun doing it by myself. So I think if we could do that as a group, we would learn a lot.
I have a question for Ruth. Since you're saying that a young lady came to your house, from where did she come from? And maybe through that ministry, they can come here and give us a weekend seminar of preparation and preparing.
Well, it's from the meat ministry. It's MEET, and I do not recall what the letters stand for just off the top of my head. But for anyone to come, it is going to cost us. So we have to know that as long as we are prepared to pay for someone to come, then I'm sure it could be arranged. Because she did not come free. I had to pay. It cost me. I'm sure they'll be willing.
So I think that could be arranged.
Not pay for Doug Batchelor to come. Okay. Yeah, just a correction. People paid to come and attend the seminar, but we did not pay. Lake Nursing did not pay a single penny for all four of them to come. We managed to get them to come free.
Okay, so my question is mostly for Rick, but whoever in the panel wants to answer, it's in reference to milk. And a lot of people, a lot of doctors out there refer you all the time to milk because it has a lot of vitamin D and it helps you a lot in the bone density and all that. So what is so bad about the milk, and how do you replace it? Or with what did you replace the vitamin, the dairy or the milk?
For women under 35, milk may add to your calcium intake. After 35, the women's hormones drop drastically, and therefore there is no buffer. When you're young and breastfeeding, you have an enzyme called renin, and that digests and breaks down the casein products in the milk so it can be digested. At the age of about 2 years old, all humans lose that enzyme. We don't have renin. So in order to digest milk, we make much more stomach acid and therefore it drops the pH of the blood. A person, Walter Veith has a video, wonderful video for anybody that wants to know. It's called Utterly Amazing. You watch that, you'll never drink milk again. Anyway, when you take the milk and the extra acid, it makes your pH drop. We're supposed to be about 7.4 pH. If you can get pH test strips at most of the drugstores that test, the average American's about 6.9, which is why we have cancer. Cancer lives in an acidic environment, not an alkaline environment. And so people get a lot more cancers in this country, and the Forks Over Knives shows the same thing. The people, they tracked 800 million people in their diets. The ones that had the least amount of milk and meats had the least amount of osteoporosis. And Walter Veith has a study that he did. New Zealand has the highest osteoporosis in the world. New Zealand has the highest dairy consumption in the world. Norway has the second highest osteoporosis in the world. Norway has the second highest dairy consumption in the world. U.S. is third highest dairy. A lot of the African countries and South American countries have almost zero osteoporosis because meat's too expensive to get, or milk. So it is a matter of replacing. Now, what I replaced it with, I just don't give her milk. I mean, a lot of people think you have to have milk on your cereal, you have to have milk in this. It's a mindset. I give her, mainly water most of the time, or I'll put lemon in the water. She's learned like water and lemon. Used to think that was terrible, but now she likes it. I get a lot of the herbal teas without the caffeine in them. She likes particularly the mints and the hibiscus. That's her favorites. I prefer usually the pomegranates and things like that. So you'll always find herbal teas in my house. A lot of times I'll put fruit in the water, just let it seep in I got one of these water purification units, and I'll just put some fruit in the water and let it seep in there. And, like oranges and lemons and mint and a few other things, strawberries, often I do that. So these are things you can do to substitute from the fact that the dairy industry is a great big marketing campaign, and the U.S. still subsidizes to this day the dairy farms. You produce dairy, they give you a subsidy to make you competitive. Why are they doing so much of this to help you do it? It's because they want to sell it and make the money. It's not doing it for health. We're the only mammal that still drinks other mammals' milk.
And if you get a chance to look at Fork Over Knives, there is a study there that they do with experimental rats, and they give them milk for a subset of one and another subset of one. Those that were fed the actual milk had a propensity for cancer, and then when they took them off of the milk, they reduced their cancer rates. So it's definitely out there. Just educate yourself. Yep, the case in peace.
Rick just mentioned what I was going to say, that out of all of God's creatures, we are the only, God creation, we are the only ones that drink milk as adults. There's no others. Right. Now, alternatives include almond milk, coconut milk, for those that want cereal, that want to, soy milk. Some people react to soy milk, but there are very good alternatives out there that have all the nutrition. And also, one thing about milk is that because of all the commercial farming, it's full of a lot of hormones and just stuff that do not belong in the human body. One last thing, when the kids were young and were homeschooling, we took a weekend trip together with 2 other homeschooling families to a farm in Pennsylvania, an actual working farm where you see things being done. And when we came back from that trip, I think I decided that I was really not drinking milk anymore. Because when you see how the cows are treated, when you see how the milk comes out with all the blood that's in it, and you know that that's what you are drinking, it's not healthy, it's not clean, it's not really fit for human consumption.
Just a quick follow-up. For people that think you have to have milk in your breakfast, basically you put milk on a bunch of carbs with little proteins, little vegetable matter, little nutrition, and you think you're going to go through the day and have a great day. Think about having a real meal in the morning, first thing. I mean, it's a foreign concept to Americans, but Ruth was saying, the best meal should be your morning meal. I have, most of my life, I make a dinner for breakfast. And I have not had milk and cereal, and I didn't give it to my kids, although as soon as they got older, they went to milk and cereal because all their friends did. So it's something that is ingrained in our culture and the advertising, but it's advertising. They want your money. They aren't looking for your health.
Quick question. I know, Sister Ruth, you've been saying so much about water and all that. Is there any place for alkaline water? Is it just a marketing gimmick we're hearing?
It's not a gimmick.
It's
We do
really
with
good.
autism. It makes a huge difference to
Yes.
autistic kids.
Okay.
Makes a difference to pretty much anybody.
So you advise us to take it if we have the...
Because of our diets, we
It's
need it so much
accessible.
more in our America. If you were eating a regular alkaline-based diet, yeah, then it's not going to make that difference. But if you're not eating regular, anything to get more alkaline to change that pH balance is critical.
Okay, and just a quick one for Sister Ruth. I know you said you were on so many medications, so doctors were having problems adjusting your medications and all that. Since you started this program, have your doctors seen any difference? Have you been off your medications, if you don't mind asking?
I'm not off the medication because it is not advisable that you withdraw your medications because there are medications that you take that unless your physician takes you off of those medications, it's not wise. So I'll let them know what I've done because most what I'm taking, it's all herbal. What I take to supplement my blood pressure, it's all herbal. So I let the doctors know what I'm taking, and they have no problem with it.
And they've seen
They say to me, if it works, stick with it. But you have to inform your physician. Do not get off your meds without your doctors knowing, because that could be detrimental. And I just have one comment to make here, too. It just slipped my mind. It's that there is a rumor that the prepared vegetarian meats that we are buying, the Loma Lindas and the Morning Star, that they are causing cancer. I'd like to know if there's any truth to it. Because they say there's so many Seventh-day Adventists coming down with cancers, and we consume a lot of those foods.
There's a lot of truth to that. We have huge amounts of sodium, way more than we need. We have process where they denature the stuff to spin it into the meats, so it's denatured protein, and it doesn't digest well. It sits in the stomach. Then we put preservatives in with the meat because the fact is we got to meet the government standards of preservatives. It is not a healthy choice. If you're going to eat it very sparingly, very sparingly.
I just wanted to ask a question here. The subsidies that we use in terms of milk, for example, the almond, the soy, the coconut, and all of that, does these subsidies supply us with sufficient nutrients? Those of us ladies who need the calcium, does these subsidies supply us with sufficient nutrients?
No.
So
they don't. You're basically, when you do this, it's for the flavor, a little bit of protein. There's not much. It's not as much protein as regular milk. The thing that makes your diet work is getting the alkaline base. You take greens and you're going to get all the calcium you need out of your greens. That's where your calcium comes from. Eat things like broccoli, cauliflower, more greens, and things, and that gets you your thing. Vitamin D, get outside and spend an hour. It takes an hour a day to meet your vitamin D quotient. Just spend some time outside.
Thank you.
I am struggling a situation, so my comment, I hope if somebody can help me here that we are talking about health. As most of you know, both of my kids are underweight, so then I am vegetarian and they are vegetarian, and I do not use milk at home, just almond milk. I do not use white bread, and then every time when I go to the doctor, they said in front of my husband, are you giving milk to your child? Oh no, I do not use regular milk. are you using meat? No. How in the world do you think they are going to grow, they are going to earn pound if you're not using that? And then I say, because I believe that they don't need that in order to be healthy. Okay, then we went to an Adventist family, and they start pushing me that it's my fault that my kids are not growing well because of my diet. And then now, the rest of the family is telling me every day, what are you cooking? Oh, I'm doing fruit in the morning, plus this, plus bread. Oh, that's nice. And then you see how are your kids. So then I'm trying just to follow more health than, seeing them growing. And that makes me really, feel really sad, because in the beginning, my husband he agreed that my diet, the way that I cook, but now he said, oh, you know what? I'm thinking about that your friend and family, maybe they have a reason, also the doctor, they have a reason that you are not doing well in the sense that you are not following what they said. And then for me, it's hard because I want the best for my kids, but also one day I wake up and say, really, I'm doing the best. So if somebody has some diet or kind of food that can give you...
What are you doing for oils?
For?
What are you doing for fats and oils?
I use just olive, olive, the
Yeah,
first
but
one.
you need a lot of oils. Olive oil is not Tom can tell you all the good oils that you need. But basically, because we cut out the meat, we're cutting out a lot of the oils that are in the meat, and you need to replace them with other sources. Personally, we have nuts in the house almost all the time. I do a lot of, I cook with coconut oil almost in olive oil. I rotate them around. It's just to keep the oils so that you don't have, because you need those complex oil bases to feed the brain. It makes a lot of, for a lot of your hormones, you need the oils. So if you don't have a source of oils, a vegetarian diet can be very restrictive and not doing so well.
Okay.
Tom could tell you what other oils, he knows more about the oils than I do, but it's a good part of the vegetarian that we usually as Adventists leave out.
Okay, I watched some video, I used the thing that I say, but...
Yeah, I mean, you have the avocado oils and you have, like you said, the olive oils, but you want to get the cold pressed or the expeller pressed oils. Those are the better oils to do, like Rick was saying, with the nuts and the seeds, but it sounds like it's more detailed. We have to get, down into it. So if we could, speak later about it if you wanted to.
There's someone that I recommend. We went to see her last year in upstate New York. Her name is Barbara O'Neill. I found her through a website, and the people that get my emails, before I send them out, I do my research first. That's how I like to do it. So I'm not just sending you random videos. And then I shared with Sister BJ, my sister, and my other sister, Deborah. And then all of us, we just got hooked on Barbara O'Neill. So I do recommend Barbara O'Neill, especially for the young women, for the older women, like myself and others, and also for mothers. Because this woman, she has 6 children, and she's as tiny as Rick's mom, sort of, small, petite. And she's from Australia. She has a lifestyle center, but she's very good, very knowledgeable. But she did say one thing that stuck with me was the wheat, that I believe it was in the 1970s or the 1980s, they changed the wheat that we used to know wheat was as high as a corn stalk. But now the wheat became short, as tall as where your knee is. So they changed it. It became a hybrid. So actually the wheat that we're eating is actually not good for us unless it's sprouted. So when you watch her videos, she'll recommend and she'll tell you. I think I shared with Sandra, it was sea salt. And especially the Himalayan has 84%, but the Celtic salt has 94%. And it has one nutrient that none of the other salts, the two best ones, she recommended Himalayan salt and the Celtic salt. They sell it at Whole Foods. It's only $6.99. Anybody can buy it, and it's better for you. So I just want, Barbara O'Neill, look her up on YouTube.
I wanted to touch on the idea of the veggie meat and cancer. 'Cause I am vegetarian. I eat a veggie burger almost every day. And there was a time that we stopped it. I used to eat a lot of tofu. I still eat tofu, but there was a time that I reduced it because I keep hearing that tofu causes cancer. And there's a lot of tofu in veggie meat, so automatically leads to people saying that veggie meat causes cancer. But there's really been no positive proof of tofu causing cancer. I've looked all over the internet, looked everywhere. I don't see. If anybody has any proof, please show me, but I haven't seen anything about tofu causing cancer. And tofu is the main ingredient in a lot of veggie meat, so...
It's not the tofu, it's right. In the processed meats, they add a lot of chemicals to the processed meat. Tofu has not been shown to do much of anything, but with the processing, they add a lot of, preservatives. They had some, basically a lot of sodiums.
I know the sodium causes high blood pressure, but not cancer. So I was just wondering if anybody's seen something definitive. I would like to see it, but I haven't seen it.
Sorry, a follow-up to Barbara O'Neill. I forgot, the 6 children. She has never taken her children after she learned how to eat properly and how the body actually works. She's never taken her children to the hospital. And she already has grandchildren, and not one grandchildren has gone to the hospital. And since we are Seventh-day Adventists, and we know that the last work is going to be medical missionary, we should be learning from these people, because hospitals are not going to be available to families. And we should learn now to prepare for what's coming.
You can just look her up, Barbara O'Neill, and you Google it, and she has a ton of videos. Yes, she has even the natural remedies, how to heal yourself. She can explain things that are very complicated in a very simple way.
Yes, my brother. Could you explain again for me about the tofu?
Tofu itself, it hasn't been shown to do cancer like Jide says. The only thing is tofu has an estrogen property, and if we eat a lot of it, men shouldn't eat a lot of it. Women, on the other hand, are not as affected by tofu as men. So because of the estrogens in it, you should eat it sparingly instead of all the time. The thing is, tofu is made out of soybean, and they use the same processed soybeans in the meats, but then they add the preservatives, they add binders to make it stick together in the, the form that makes it, and then they add flavorings, and they add a lot of chemicals and things, and some of those are questionable, all right? So I don't have a study that says it, will cause cancer, but a lot of those chemicals have been used, and people, have adverse reactions to it. So I don't know that it's cancer causing, but it is not as healthy. Those meats, if you're going to eat them very sparingly. I hardly ever have them. But it's just basically eat foods that are least processed the foods, the healthier you'll be. When they process it, they're adding stuff to it. They're changing it.
So, Sister Ruth, I was glad when you talked about the water, and then Rick kind of expounded on the idea about water, and then Tim brought up the concept about the alkaline water. So one of my questions is there a difference between drinking the alkaline water versus the distilled water? And maybe you can share with us, because I know a lot of people drink distilled water, me being one of them. And so can you share some differences between the alkaline and the distilled, either Sister Ruth or Rick?
I don't know too much about it. Distilled water, but I have been told that it's not advisable to drink distilled water on a continual basis. It's lacking in some of the minerals or whatever it is that water, but that one should get from the water. The distilled water just is water condensed, and so it is not advisable to drink it on a regular basis. I don't know if
distilled water has 0 minerals because it's made strictly to heat it up. The water goes up, it condenses down. It has no minerals. So when you drink it, it's really pure water. But the thing is, it does what's called a reverse osmosis. It has no minerals. Your bones have minerals. It takes minerals out of your bone into the water because it tries to keep a balance. And so when you do it, especially ladies who are over 35, you start accelerating osteoporosis by drinking distilled water.
Any other questions?
Now you guys are bankruptcy in bad health, and you choose to change it. The question is for the panel, really. Do you guys feel more spiritual with God? Do you feel a closer walk with God?
Personally, my experience with the young lady who came to my home, the first thing we do in the morning is have worship. And she insists on worship twice a day. Before we do anything, she wakes me up at 5:30 and we have worship. And we end the day with worship. And I find one of the books we use a lot of, in addition to the Bible, is the Ministry of Healing, which is a book I suggest that every one of us should read. It gives us a great insight into what we ought to do and what we ought not to do. And I have read the book in the past. It did not have the meaning, as much meaning to me. I did not get the full gist from that book as when we did it together. And I strongly suggest that twice a day worship does help. And twice a day walking does help. We walk first thing in the morning and we walk after lunch.
Excuse me. Definitely, yes, it has. For my program, I exercise a lot. Some of my friends will tell you that they think I do it too much, but with that has come a sense of mental clarity, and through that mental clarity, understanding that I am able to do things that before I never thought I could, that no matter how dark it gets, whatever troubles I'm going through, I do have the strength to make it through. I may not know how I'm going to get through it, but I will make it through it. So definitely, I have gone closer to God through this.
My view is, personally, if you're feeling better, you will have a better relationship with God. If you're not feeling well, if things ache you here and there, it's going to be a harder time to have that relationship. So once you start feeling better, once you start looking better, once you start presenting yourself better, you have a glow about you. And guess what? That's because the Lord is blessing you, because you're taking actions for yourself to make His temple better. So definitely yes.
I would have to say, for me, it's the lack of stress. I don't have stress when I'm not feeling, when I'm feeling well. I don't have stress. When I'm sick, I feel terrible. I don't want to study. I just want to curl up a ball. You know, it's a matter of health. Now, on the average, I get sick maybe once every year to year and a half. And that's just, it seems like I can't escape some sort of flu or something once, or not a flu, usually a little cold. So I don't get sick hardly ever. And when it is, it really knocks me down. And at the time, I don't usually study as much because I just feel bad. So I would say the fact that when you're feeling good, it's easier to concentrate on God. It's easier to pray. You're not sitting there worrying about an ache or a pain or your what's going to happen to me. It gives you more of a peace of mind. So I would say just because you're feeling better, you're thinking better.
I just wanted to share a testimony. Most of you know that last year around this time, just about 2 weeks ago, my husband and I were in Tennessee doing the same program like Sister Ruth. And after I came back, we did the same program. We'll have our dinner in the morning. We'll have 2 meals a day. And then I'll make juice for him in the morning and in the afternoon. If he said, sometimes if he says he's hungry, he still wanted something, there's always juice, the kale, the carrot, the celery, and sometimes different things we'll put in, sometimes cabbage. And I was using the same diet too. And then just about, maybe about, he passed away September, October, I started to feel a pain right in my leg, right under my bottom. And I called the doctor because it was so difficult for me to walk up the stairs. I remember one day I was going up and I had to turn back, sit down, and I used to have to go on my hands to come up the step or take one tread at a time. And this pain that was so intense. Anyway, I still continued to follow the program. And one Sunday morning, I went to the bathroom. And I'm telling you, it was like I was constipated. I was having cold sweat. Nothing. I tell myself, if I could make it, I needed to call 911 because I was having so much complication. I wasn't constipated. Anyway, I had to actually use my finger to clear my bottom from whatever it was. And I tell you something, to this day, I can jump, I can climb the stairs, no problem. And I said, it's only God, whatever it is, my body cleanses itself from whatever it was, and that's how I pass it. So the diet, sometimes some of us might think is just a gimmick, but God has given us instructions, and he wanted us to follow them. They said, eat early in the morning, and I started, and then this past week, because of how I was working, I realized I was eating too much because I will go to work, eat in the morning. When I come home, I'm so hungry, and then I'm eating this big dinner at night. And so I had put back on some weight because I had lost some weight too. So now I started to eat. Instead of eating early in the morning, they gave us lunch at 11 o'clock. So I'll eat that big meal at 11. And then in the afternoon, I'll have some. When I come home, I don't eat anything. So we can look at things and ways to help ourselves so that we can better our lifestyle, because it's good to be healthy.
Amen. Do we have any other questions or comments? Okay, so I guess we'll move on to the next short portion is on some health tips. So I was going to talk about one, but I'll split it into two. There's a term called, well, before I get into that, will we all agree that the original diet is probably the best diet that God has given us? You know, is that, are we in agreement with that? Like, okay, all right. And could we say that anything that steers away from that could possibly basically lead us into health trouble? the further we get away from that, because God gave herbs for the service of man, right? And we've seen here how herbs have healed, and especially in our own lives. And if we stick to that, it'll bring healing. And the further away from it, it goes into the opposite direction. I wanted to, so for example, anything from the original, I would say, is a good way to say that it's worse for you. For example, if someone drinks Coca-Cola, even though I don't think Coca-Cola is, really, should be forbidden, but I would say that anything from the original of Coca-Cola is worse for you. So if you drink Diet Coke versus Coca-Cola, or if you're going to drink whole milk, okay, that's better than skim milk, or whole milk is better than 2% milk. You always want to try to stick to the original. There's a term called digestive leukocytosis. Has anyone ever heard of that? It's okay. What that is your body is basically, when you eat something, your white blood cell count goes crazy. Well, it doesn't always go crazy, but it can go crazy based on what you're eating. So studies have found where the more that you cook your food, the more that your white blood cells react as in a toxic environment. So like for people who are eating meat, for example, when they're eating meat, your body reacts as if you're being poisoned. So it releases the same amount of white blood cells as if you're being poisoned to try to deal with the problem of what you just ate. So so they even found that in cooked vegetables, but mild. I'm not saying it is as bad as meat, but when you start cooking your vegetables, it's like a mild digestive leukocytosis. So it's more on the mild, even though the vegetables can still be healthy for you, but it still reacts in your body like that. So so when we were talking about the veggie meats, what is a veggie meat? Is that natural? Is it something that God has given us, or is that processed? It's the processed. And the thing is that with all processed foods, your body reacts to it as it's a foreign invader. Your body does not really recognize what this is because there's so many different ingredients in this. Now again, it's a lot of people here enjoy the veggie meat, and I'm not here to condemn anybody in regards to what you're eating, because only the Holy Spirit can convict you in what you need to eat in your life. Because we all have a different relationship with food, but I'm just, I would say we just need to pray about what we're eating, and if it's something that we should, think about removing or adding to our diets or lifestyle. Because this is a body that God has given us. And we want to remember, can this body be glorified more if we cut things out of our diet, or if we add things into our diet? So it's just something to pray about. Because again, it can be a very sensitive subject, and again, I'm not here telling anybody what's right and what's wrong. And one other thing I wanted to mention is that if people are curious about the allergy test, because I know Rick mentioned before that he had an allergy test done, and it had, 19 things you were allergic to?
Yeah, 19 out of 184.
If you wanted to do a self-allergy test, one way to do it is when you wake up, you check your heartbeat. You see, what your resting heartbeat is. Then you check again your heartbeat right when you're about to eat. Finish your meal. About 30 minutes later, you check your heartbeat again. And if your heartbeat has raised about 15 to 20 beats more than your resting heartbeat, you just ate something that you're allergic to. Okay? So it's something to consider. It's a cheaper way than going to get an allergy test done. So it's something that just to put in the back of your head if that's something that you're afraid that maybe you are allergic to something. Or you might get a reaction, true, but sometimes we have a mild allergy that we don't even know that we're allergic to. Sometimes our body is able to fight it off, but we don't see any symptoms of it. So that's one way we can just do, so when we're eating something, and if we notice that our heart rate is higher than normal, we should just consider what did we just eat in that last meal. And then you can start the elimination process of, okay, maybe I should try to eliminate this. Okay, do I still get that same reaction? Was it maybe a condiment that I added to it? Was it, so you have to look at, allergy test is more expensive. This is a cheaper way to do it, especially if you're simple in the way that you eat. And I guess the other thing I would say is drinking with your meals. How many people here drink with their meals, just out of curiosity? It's just sometimes, okay. I didn't know if I really had to mention it or, okay. We're all aware about drinking with our meals, right? We've heard the implications of what it is, and I remember, Gita, you was telling me you were going to the restaurant, the waiters look at you funny because you don't want anything to drink. So, yeah. So just in case if anybody doesn't know about the water, is that it, when you eat, it dilutes the acid in your stomach, so it causes problems to digest the food that you're eating. So you want to wait 20 minutes before, an hour after is a general rule of thumb of how to do it.
So one of the things that I learned when you're transitioning, because a lot of times to change habits is hard, and if you are so accustomed to drinking with your food, what you can do is before you eat and after you eat, drink a hot cup of lemon water, because the lemon will help to neutralize the acids in your stomach, to prepare your stomach for digestion. And then when you finish eating, if you drink hot lemon water, it won't interfere with the digestion. So as you are moving towards not drinking with your food, this is just a short, simple tip that can help you to move in that direction.
I think that's it, right? Yeah, I think, what's the next step? Okay.
So we want to thank our panel, and we want to thank you, not only for being here, but for sharing, because the sharing is so very, very important. And while everyone was talking, I did take a few notes. So we talked to, what's his name? Brother Peterson, the media. We'll put the utterly amazing video from Walter Veith. We'll put that on our site, which is on the church website. And also, for those of you that wanted to know what MEET Ministry stands for, it stands for Missionary Education Evangelistic Training. And so we will definitely reach out to them. We've already started reaching out to them, and that's a possibility of maybe someone coming to provide some type of health program for us. And Sister Ruth talked about cooking classes. So I have asked a number of people in the congregation if they wanted to share. So if you're interested in that, please let us know, and we will plan an event around that. Everybody started saying when we first got started, oh, it's no one here, it's no one here. And I said to all of them, I said, well, first of all, we need to remember that Jesus said, where 2 or 3 are gathered, I will be in the midst. And now we see that people came out and that you are interested. And if you want more of these types of programs and you want to hear more about simple strategies to move towards a healthier lifestyle, we certainly are here to offer it. So at this time, we're going to have a closing hymn, and then Tim is going to lead us in our closing prayer. So hymn 100, Great is Thy Faithfulness, and then Tim will lead us in our closing prayer. Thank you so much for coming out. And continued Happy Sabbath to everyone. Oh, is he here? Oh, okay. And when we close out, we talked this morning about Lenny was here from Puerto Rico, and he's going to share his testimony. I didn't see him earlier, but thank you, Shannon, for letting me know that he did, that he's here. So if you would like to stay, and we encourage you to hear more testimonies. This is not necessarily about health, but I'm sure part of it will be, but his testimony is something that we want to hear as well. Thank you, Shannon. Winnie, can you start us?